Stop force feeding your brain to-do lists. This is part 3 of why to-do lists fail us, leave us feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, sleepless, and a whole litany of other types of negative feelings and thoughts. So just a quick review. Last part 1 was about cognitive overload and how the brain can only give you so much. And when you have too much to do, and the say your cognitive is like a plate, your thoughts and your abilities, things will start to fall off. And a lot of times you don't even notice that things have fallen off. And sometimes things get almost violently pushed off. Things that are important that we need to be doing. So we address cognitive overload and how what are the opportunities for minimizing that, if not eliminating it altogether through, anecdotes and giving you antidotes for the first few steps for making that happen, because I'm a huge fan of baby steps. And then part 2 was about motivation and distraction. To-do lists fail us because of our lack of motivation. Like when things are difficult, we don't want to do them. So how to get them done when we don't want to was what we talked about last week. And to reward ourselves, we forget that everything we do deserves a reward. We're just under the impression that we just have to keep going, and doing more and more and pushing harder and harder. And all of that is okay to a certain extent, but when you forget to feel really good about what you're doing and why you're doing it, life becomes pretty miserable pretty fast. So that brings us to today, part 3. We're going to get really, really nerdy and talk about something called the Zeigarnek Effect. Now, this is when the brain is hardwired in such a way to remember the things that we have not accomplished and to beat ourselves up about those things we did not, versus it's easier than the things that we did do, the things that we did accomplish. And that goes back a little bit to what I call the lizard brain, or some people call the caveman brain, the original thinking of the hardwiring of our brain a gazillion years ago. Gazillion, that's a scientific term, about how we are hardwired for survival. So if things don't get finished, that could be dangerous. If things are left undone, that creates confusion. And those are all really bad things in the old lizard brain. Okay, but the truth is, things undone are now up for reevaluation. They're up for looking under the microscope. They're up for sharing, delegating, doing, dumping from the other vlog, right? So we want to be able to shift and negate that Zeigarnik effect so that we no longer are having frustration and sleepless nights and angst and those negative voices in our head that tell us we're not good enough. Because the Zeigarnik effect is a perfect example of what I feel is one of the most dangerous pillars of white supremacy, which is perfectionism and the need to feel perfect. And that goes into, of course, having it all done every day before you go to sleep. So again, the last 2 vlogs gave you tons of actionable ways to start attacking your to-do list in a way that works best for you, because we are all different. So I'm a pen and paper kind of gal, right? So my stuff is written. I do have things in my virtual calendar and on my phone, but my go-to is my actual calendar, my actual hard note calendar. And I like it that way. It works for me. Okay, so an antidote for reversing this effect and minimizing it, if not deleting it altogether from the way your brain processes information, is to do what's called reverse engineer. So when we have these really large tasks that are overwhelming, and they're like, the saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you climb Mount Everest? One step at a time. So these are huge, daunting tasks. And the way to accomplish them and break up that effect of tasks unfinished is to stop looking at the end game and start looking at what can you do today in this moment right now. and that'll give you a sense of accomplishment and reward. So reverse engineering, let's just say like planning a wedding. So the end date is overwhelming that day. And so you say, okay, it's that day. And then what happened before that day? And what happened before that day? And what happened before that day? And it probably begins with picking a date, which then becomes malleable when you start looking at locations and when you start looking at family members you'd like to attend and flight dates and holidays and so much more, your favorite band being available. So you just back it up, back it up, back it up into these little tiny squares that are easy to accomplish. And one step at a time, they get you to Everest. They get you to that ultimate last step. But when we're looking at the last step as a whole, it's overwhelming and it causes cognitive overload and leads us into this Zeigarnek Effect where we're concentrating too much on what is left to do instead of concentrating on what can we do right now. Because right now in this moment is all we have. I can't do something that's scheduled for July 11th in the future right now today because that's a couple months out. But what can I do today? What steps can I take to make that day exactly the way I imagine that it would be? So those baby steps are really important, and the best way to negate this effect and help you feel better about your day-to-day activities. Okay, and it goes back to the other vlogs, the one on delegate, dump, and do, the one about being able to stay motivated, how do you do that, and minimizing your distractions. When you begin to master those steps, then moving forward becomes easier and easier. And then I have a couple of other super cool ways that I bet you have never heard of for reimagining your to-dos. Because when we can rewire the brain to think in the way that is more beneficial to how we choose to get things done, how we speak to ourselves, and we can also talk about how you speak to yourself and start to negate those negative voices or release those negative voices so that you can begin to fill them with positive thoughts, which lead to positive questions, which leads to positive actions. I would love to do that with you. So I'm Elle Grinnell, and this is the All Things Happy and Healthy vlog again this week. For those of you who are new, just reiterating that I consider myself to be a self-proclaimed neuroscientist, having working on the reward center of the brain, like the habanula and these things like the Zeigarnek Effect for over 25 years. And I'm a faithfully optimistic thought leader. It comes naturally to me. My expertise is in the area of intrapersonal communication. Those are the voices in your head. That's the mind chatter that goes on, and you could have many of those voices. So we learn to manage them and get a speaker and a leader for them, and also then sometimes some of them got to get fired. We got to kick them to the curb. So if you're in any kind of pain, having fear, doubt, and worry, have a super important task that's looming, that has you deer in the headlights, fearfully stuck, without a way to go forward, I'd like to invite you to hop on my calendar so that we can move that forward rapidly and properly under grace. That lights me up. That's what I do, people. Take advantage of the offer that I'm putting before you. It's in the notes below. And as always, follow, share, subscribe, like, comment. Those things are super cool and a way to pay it forward, so to speak. And lastly, I just like to say, when we remember to take a moment and breathe and let it go, and do that just a few times, you get more oxygen in your body, which gets more oxygen into your brain, which helps get you into the alpha level of consciousness, which allows you to speak a little bit more clearly from your truth. So until next week, stay happy and healthy, my friends. Aloha always.